Welcome back into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Jeremy Werner. Been a while since I've been on this, but it's been a busy week of training camp, some family stuff going on. But I've been wanting to do this podcast for a while. Joey Wagner is joining me because we've had a full week of training camp. Not a lot that we've been able to see, and we'll dig into that. But we want to say what we've learned so far in week one. We've had one open practice on Saturday that we got to learn a lot more about the personnel on this team, got to see this team in action a little bit. Otherwise, it's been a mostly closed camp so far. There's 3 days where we haven't been able to see anything. They're scrimmaging on Monday, and we're not going to be able to see any of that. But Brett Bielema and his staff do meet with us every day. We get to talk to the assistant coaches, learn more about this team, and we do learn a little bit from the coaching staff. But Joey, we don't know as much about these Illinois teams here of late. The last 3 years, we had the COVID year where we had to shut it down. Lovie Smith had open training camp before that. But Brett Bielema has kept a tighter ship during training camp where we haven't been able to see this team as much. I don't like it. I know the fans probably want to know a lot more about their team. But Brett Bielema, he heard from Scott Frost last year and had heard everything he needed to hear about shutting camp down because Scott Frost was shocked that Ryan Walters would have a four-man front in his bag of tricks. So that's all Brett Bielema needed to learn, and he's going to keep things as tight as possible because he wants to win games. I get it. I don't like it.
I don't like it either. I understand what he's saying. I think for us, it probably gives us a little more credit. Like, I don't know anyone on the beat is going to sit here and draw out plays and schemes to put out there for the Wyomings and Indiana of the world. But I appreciate the credit that he thinks that we are smart enough to do that. I'm with you, man. I get it. I understand. I don't like it. It is what it is. And part of me got a little tricked because I thought, okay, if there's no new coaches, and maybe this year we would be able to get in there. He obviously made the offensive coordinator change. And frankly, I don't know if that was going to matter one way or the other when it all came down to it. But we're learning as much as we can. The transparency from them does help. I mean, I think we would be foolish to sit here and say it doesn't. I think we, as a collective beat, need to be better in understanding what to ask to try to get more information. But we're all doing the best we can with it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think fans that follow the Illini Inquirer during the Lovie era, Cubit had it open. When I was on the radio under Beckman, they had 2 weeks of training camp. You really get to know the team. And, I covered Jerry Kill for a year, and I was really the only guy who was there all the time in Northern Illinois. Right. And he basically said, hey, don't show plays. If injuries happen, ask me about it. Don't live tweet. I want you to ask about injuries so I can notify the parents before you say anything, all that stuff. And it was kind of understood that you don't divulge a ton about like plays, schemes, all of that, but you can get to know the team. And I think that was invaluable. And I think it's good for the team to have as much buzz as possible, whether it's about, hey, Tommy DeVito had a great day. You put context if somebody has a bad day, you always want to do that. But I think we do a pretty good job of that. So that's where it's hard. We know less about Illinois going in, but we have learned some things. So on this podcast, we're going to dive into all of that stuff, Joey. But before we do that, we have to talk about a new commit in the class. And this one is a pretty nice feather in the cap for the Illini. I know some fans want this class to be better. It's not a high-ranked class right now, but to steal a commitment from North Carolina, which is recruiting at a high level under Mac Brown, and to get one of the top 4 highest-ranked prospects in this class is certainly a good news day for Illinois on Saturday. As Zach Tobe, 3-star defensive back out of Ocoee, Florida. He's teammates with Calvin Smith, a 3-star edge rusher. That's a really nice duo to add to the defense. 6'1", adds some length. He needs to add some strength, but certainly great ball skills, Joey. And just another Florida guy. The Illinois coaching staff, whether it was Lovie Smith or Brett Bielema, whether it was Kenodo Hudson or Aaron Henry, they have a type, and it's Florida. It's Florida 3-star defensive backs with length and athleticism and ball skills. And Zach Tobe certainly adds to that.
And some confidence, too. I think that's the thing we hear about a lot with the Florida defensive backs is there's some confidence there. Devin Witherspoon probably takes it to a different level entirely with his trash talking. Jeremy, I know you've written about that. But yeah, man, ho-hum, they get into Florida again. It's been a fruitful place. And as we look at what this roster is going to need beyond this year, like this year defensive back, you don't think a lot about it, right? If you're from the outside looking in, it's like, okay, Quan Martin, yep. Sidney Brown, all right, that makes sense. Devin Witherspoon, okay, what will Kendall Smith look like? Will it be somebody else who starts opposite? But you've got three guys who like elevate it. And you think, well, you don't have to worry about that. Like you maybe have to worry about other positions on the field, but that's going to change, Jeremy. Kendall Smith is in his final year. Sidney Brown's in his final year. Quan Martin is. Devin Witherspoon will probably have some decisions to make if he plays as well as you and I think he can play, and really the coaching staff thinks he can play. And you've seen some scouts kind of trickle in and out of Illinois camp. So there has to be a next wave, right? And I think they addressed that in the 22 class. And obviously they're still addressing it in 23. And by the way, there's still two pretty big guys out there that they would like to add to that. And you and I believe they'll take them all if they can get a Jair Hill and a Sabor Kareem. But yeah, Toby's a good one for them. And it's a Power 5 flip. There's been some discussion about, is there enough in this class that didn't have, like there's a lot of guys in this class that didn't have a lot of Power 5 offers. Zachary Tobe's not one of those guys, and they flipped him from North Carolina, and I think it's a good flip for them.
Yeah, Tobe is ranked in the top 900 the last I checked, 845 in the country, the number 69 safety. Nice.
Nice.
Composite. But yeah, he had offers from Boston College, North Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky, Kansas, Iowa State, Nebraska, Purdue, Louisville. Like these are good programs, right? And Illinois got in and were one of his top 4 schools. He also visited Boston College, UCF, in North Carolina. He visited Illinois with his teammate, Calvin Smith. Calvin, they call him Trey Smith, committed right after his visit. Tobe went to North Carolina, figured they were the leader at the time, and North Carolina got his commitment. North Carolina was probably the biggest kind of brand that was after him. And he told me that, like, after the visit, he kept thinking about Illinois, that Illinois, he said, Champaign was the nicest campus he'd been to. He loved that. And more importantly, he loved Ryan Walters. And even though Ryan Walters is the safeties coach, defensive backs coach, Tobe is going to play corner to start. But he's got versatility to play nickel. He could potentially play free safety as well. And that's another thing the staff is doing a lot of, finding guys that can play multiple positions. I think Jaheim Clark can do that, whether it's corner or free safety as well. So they are definitely doing that in this class. Kanari Wilcher, I think, can play multiple spots on the defensive backfield. But he said he kept thinking about Illinois, and he said, I didn't want to decommit. It wasn't my plan, but ultimately I got to do what's best for me, not what's best for everybody else and where everybody else thinks I should go. And there was an appeal about being different. And whether Bielema comes in with all the credibility of Wisconsin, of being in the NFL, right? Illinois is still not thought of as a program that's definitely on the rise, right? It's still, to most guys out there, you still have to believe in them. You still have to want to do something different. And we've seen that continue to play out in this class, Joey, whether it's Malik Elzy, which obviously is a huge target. He goes to Cincinnati, which is right now the bigger brand in college football. It's a more proven winner right now in college football. They're going to the Big 12. They have momentum. Illinois is still trying to get that momentum. So I still think getting a flip like Zachary Tobe is a really good thing for Illinois when you're trying to show other people outside of winning football games that, hey, there's something going on here. There's still people that are believing in us and what we're going to do. I think it's good to flip somebody from North Carolina. I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, and I think also the fact that you get a commit from Florida, this isn't like it's somebody who grew up, and there's nothing wrong with growing up in the state of Illinois, rooting for Illinois. Illinois had success with those players. Hello, Doug Kramer. But it's not like this was like, oh, I've always dreamed of playing at Illinois. Come hell or high water, I'm going to commit there. I don't care if they're 1-11 or 11-1. This really does show a belief that Tobe had in this coaching staff, and frankly, Jeremy, if you're looking at how they're recruiting defensive backs, I don't want to say like just put all your trust in coaches no matter what, because I think they're paid pretty well enough to have some accountability. But you should probably trust where Ryan Walters and Aaron Henry and Brett Bielema are getting and how they're getting defensive backs, because they've got a success there. And man, they're going to get all the mileage out of that Kirby Joseph blow up until somebody else does. And they think those two guys are on the roster right now with Sidney Brown and Quan Martin.
Yeah, I think it's a position they're pretty high on in the future. Like we'll talk about it later, but Tyson Rooks, they're just incredibly intrigued, ridiculously raw, but he's 6'3". They love the way he can flip his hips. Probably a ways away from making a contribution on the field, but they think his ceiling's really high. TJ Griffin, Ryan Walter said, has great ball skills. And Matthew Bailey got some first team reps last week. And these are guys that didn't have a lot of offers, right? Elijah McCantos was a great get last class. I think he's going to be really good. And Xavier Scott kind of reminds me of Taz Nicholson a little bit. So, but this class, you get Jaheim Clark, who chose Illinois over Iowa State. Kenari Wilcher, who chose Illinois over Indiana. Zachary Tobe, who chose Illinois over North Carolina, and a bunch of Power 5 offers. Even though these guys aren't 4-stars and maybe getting the headlines of other people, these are better recruiting wins, right? Then maybe it doesn't end up that way, but in recruiting wins, if you're just talking about the recruitment process, you're beating bigger schools for these guys. Obviously, they think Bailey, Griffin, Rooks, McCantos, Scott can be great, but those three are more the level of the McCantos recruitment wins than the previous ones. I think we're quietly seeing some of that in this class, where there's TJ McMillan, Zach Amland, right? Like the offensive line guys we liked last year, but the recruiting wins so far in this class were a little bit better. So I know it's incremental progress, maybe. I know everyone wants Jair Hill and Malik Elzy and the 4-star guys, but there is some incremental progress in those recruiting wins in this class. So if you're looking for, signs that they're getting better, I think that's a sign, especially defensive backs, man. That's a pretty good sell given what you did with Kirby Joseph. Toby said that was part of his process, seeing what they did with him in 1 year. And I think Quan Martin, Sidney Brown, Devin Witherspoon, all those guys had their best year last year, and all those guys are in line for big seasons this year. I think the defensive backs, outside of running backs, I feel as confident in that group probably as any on the team.
Also, no, you forget Caden Fagan was a pretty big Power 5 recruiting win. But yeah, I'm with you. I think if you're a high school player, Jeremy, you and I, let's just back up a little bit. You and I have known Ryan Walters now for a year, 18 months. I don't know, whatever the case may be. It's pretty impressive, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, just beyond football, he's just an impressive individual to talk with. And you can see, like, there's coaches, and you've done this a lot longer. Maybe you saw it with Nate Shieldhouse earlier, but like, there's people you're like, oh yeah, that guy's he's gonna make a difference somewhere. He's kind of on the fast track. I know you and I have talked. We think Aaron Henry's in that same mold where it's like, yeah, things are gonna accelerate for this coach really quickly.
Kevin Kane, yeah.
Kevin Kane, yeah. And I think if you, like, high school kids, prospects, recruits can read that. Like, they can tell when things are going. Like, they don't have to open up ESPN and be like, oh, wait a minute, Adam Rittenberg has Ryan Walters. Like, you can just tell that, like, somebody has something. And Ryan Walters, he has that, man. He has that whole body of work, and that translates down to in the recruiting meetings, trying to get a recruit, and you're seeing it play out a little bit, especially on the defensive backfield.
Yeah, and for anyone thinking, oh, does this mean they're out for Jair Hill, Sabur Kareem? Nope. Illinois would take all of them. Know that for sure. Like, they would take all of those guys. Whether they can get all of them, that's another level. But Sabur Kareem, I think Illinois has kind of been the leader for him for a while here, Joey. 6'3", defensive back out of New Jersey. He's a great lacrosse player. But Duke has been very involved. Duke has 5 DB commits, though. But some people around Sabur are really interested in their academics. But we'll see. He doesn't seem to have any kind of timeline at this point from the last I talked to him. But Illinois is in deep with him. And then Jair Hill, it's an Illinois-Michigan battle. And I know nobody kind of wants the optimistic view of this probably right now, but the fact that he hasn't picked Michigan and Illinois as his top competition, that's probably a good sign, right? And he just visited Illinois. He just visited Michigan as well. But he also has offers from some big schools, whether it's Florida State, Oklahoma, Oregon. So he could take some more visits. And then Alabama and Ohio State have checked in on him, right? So he might be the kind of guy who wants to wait this out, see if maybe his senior year, first couple games of film, maybe one of those, blue bloods comes along. But Illinois, I think, has done everything right in this recruitment. It's just you don't have the leverage of some other programs at this point. But the fact that Michigan would have leverage over you and he hasn't shut it down yet, I think that's a good sign that you're definitely a major player in this recruitment. And maybe at the moment, I think at the moment, these are my words, at the moment, if he made a decision tomorrow, I think Illinois would feel pretty good about where they are.
Yeah, and I'm look, let's be honest, Jeremy. You and I understand the importance of fan base realizes of Jair Harold's recruitment. So there might be some eye rolling, like, oh, okay, trying to justify if this is a bridesmaid. But that's just the reality, dude.
Yes.
They've nailed this thing, this recruitment. What they haven't done is nailed the last 10 years that they don't have any control over. Like they've nailed this thing.
You can say close. You could say close it down. Well, how do you do that? Right? You pressure him, and then he's like, well, the pressure, like that could backfire, right? So I think all you can
need him more than he needs you.
Yes.
Like you don't want to pressure him and make him mad and have him feel like that trust that you spent more than a year cultivating is just gone because you want the immediacy of a commit. Like you have to play this thing out.
You don't want to ruin that comfort level, right? The comfort level that he has with you, that it's family, that it's all those things. Like the kid's going through his recruiting process. Who cares? Other people might be committing, but he doesn't have to. He's got great options, and he's going to have great options, and Illinois will be there. And that is the message. We will be here when you are ready. But we think we have the best spot because of Ryan Walters, because of Aaron Henry, because of Brett Bielema, because we're close to home. NIL would be great for you, and you could be the guy right away. You could be our Antonio Johnson, right? Like he was one of the guys I was most excited about that Lovie Smith was in on, and he's proven to be a great player. Like Jair Hill gives me Antonio Johnson kind of vibe. So you can't probably get over aggressive if you're in Illinois' position here, but you continue to show him how much you want him and why he could be best here. That's what you keep selling, is why this is the spot, and maybe not going to Michigan and being another guy. You'd be the guy at Illinois.
Yeah, there's a way to keep your foot pretty firmly pressed on the gas of this recruitment and not take this thing into overdrive. I don't know a lot about cars. I really hope that works.
But I think that works.
There's a way to.
Yeah. Neither of us gearheads, so I think that worked. Yeah.
Somebody's going to tell me it didn't, and I just can't wait for that moment. But yeah, again, just keep doing what you're doing, right? And keep kind of being available. Your program's available to him. He's visited a few times. Like, just keep going. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I mean, if it doesn't work, I don't think anybody can sit back and fault how Illinois approached this. And that's, maybe someone's not going to like hearing that. Maybe it feels like carrying water. But I think it's God's honest truth is they've done this all the way through, Jeremy.
Reminds me of the Shimon Cooper recruitment a little bit. I felt like Illinois was right there the entire time, but Shimon wanted his recruitment, and he had great options. And by the end, he's most comfortable with Illinois. Now, Shimon hasn't made a huge impact on the field yet, but it was a huge recruiting win. So it kind of gives me those vibes a little bit. Maybe Sean Miller too. Sean Miller, you kind of had to wait for that to pay off. Aiden Laughley kind of had to wait for that to pay off a little bit, but
Ian Pugh.
Yeah. Yeah, and ended up being pretty good for those guys. All right, Joey. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, real quick, we do have to say, in the time they got a commitment, they lost a commitment. Enrico Jackson. Has that been about a week now, Jeremy? It feels like it's been a little bit. That commitment happened pretty quickly. I mean, it was like I think the first night of his visit, he was ready to pop. And
yeah,
I don't know. Obviously, they wanted him. They took his commitment, but I don't know that the decommitment was a total shock either.
Yeah, you can say, Joe, it wasn't. I mean, it was an impulsive commitment on a Friday night of his official visit, right after he'd met with the staff for like the first time in person, and he committed. And it's like, whoa, this guy has offers from like Miami, Michigan. Didn't know how hard those schools were pushing, right? But then right after he commits, like he's getting offers from some other SEC programs. Like that one could be interesting to watch. And he committed. We had heard that Illinois knew they had to keep recruiting him, and that's true of all their class. Like, and we see that with Rico, right? Like they are going to keep recruiting their commits as hard as they can. Like look what happened with North Carolina. Like now North Carolina, Tobe was the last ranked recruit in their class. So maybe he's not a big loss for them. And they can say they mutually parted ways or whatever, but Tobe decided to leave and go to Illinois. So that can happen. And certainly we're seeing JoJo Hayden get offers from Missouri and other programs, right? So you have to keep committing those guys, but Rico is talented. I thought he was a little raw, but certainly very talented, big physical offensive lineman. And they got to find another one. I think it's not the biggest need because you had 5 preps last year. Zy Chrysler has 3 years of eligibility, right? Like Adams has 2 years of eligibility, but you want to keep building that depth and that offensive line identity. And Joey, from what we hear, they're probably going to look at every kind of option, right? Whether it's prep option that they recruited before, maybe guys they evaluated but didn't push for because they got Jackson on board, or maybe it's another JUCO because JUCO was really good for them because it looks like they're going to start 2 JUCOs on the offensive line.
Or maybe you get in the portal. And there's the portal's so different. It's weird to say this, but it's still like we have to remember that there's still a lot of years of eligibility you can get out of the transfer portal, and maybe that'll be an option. So I'm with you. I don't think you have to impulsively freak out and oh my God, get on the horn. We got to find somebody to commit tomorrow. I think you can let it play out a little bit, revisit some relationships you've established, see what it looks like. But, it's a spot to fill, right? It's a spot to fill in the offensive line room. And you want to keep building. That's a position you just can't really slow up on. You got to keep churning in and out of there.
Yeah, I would say if there's, 4 needs left in this class, I'd say wide receivers number 1. Number 2 would probably be DB because they could still get a really good one. Offensive line, and I still think defensive line. I still think they could look at defensive line in this class because I still just see in the really underclassmen, because I qualified Johnny Newton as Keith Randolph, like being 3rd and 4th year guys as upperclassmen, like Evan Kurtz, Ced McConnell, T-Raw Edwards. And then you got Harkless, who I love. I think he's the best get in this class, him and Fagan. And then Mason Morgan, who I like as a prospect, but I just think they need more. I think they need more depth there, Joey.
I'm with you, and we'll see how that plays out. Maybe that'll be a portal. But we talked about this a lot. I don't know that you can continue to build. There's a lot of eligibility in the portal, but I think there's still preference of the high school kids. You've seen that play out. Brett's called himself a developmental program. Maybe preference isn't the right word, but they're not giving up on the high school route. So I think that's maybe even put defensive line over offensive line. Kind of nitpicking a little bit there. It's pretty close.
Yeah. All right, let's focus on what we've learned so far through camp and how we're going to do this. A little bit like my VIP piece on the site, Joey, is let's break this down by position. So I'm just going to throw out each position, and you tell me the major thing you have learned from this group, and then I'll build off that. But we'll try and give a little bit of – we don't need to name everybody on the roster here, but just give me one big takeaway from that group that we've learned in 1 week. So, of course, the main one, a big issue for Illinois for several years – the most important position on the field, quarterback. Go.
I think this is Tommy DeVito's job. Like, I think we did like a position battle piece before camp, and was it like 90-10 or something, Joe? It was pretty high. I'd probably up that, like 95-5 or something. I just think he's really running away with this thing.
Yeah, I'm bullish on him. I think he's really talented. I think he has all the tools. From the moment I dove into the Syracuse film, you see every physical thing you need. He's got a strong arm. He's a good athlete. He can get out and prolong plays. I think Barry Lunny's going to use him well. There's going to be a lot more quick hitters. And from what I've seen of him live, and it's limited, right? What we've seen of him live, but in the spring game and what we saw Saturday, I think he's pretty accurate. And that's something we didn't see out of Brandon Peters. And I'm not trying to get down on Brandon Peters here, but there's also that swagger, that confidence in Tommy DeVito that I think Illinois needs at that position. I thought Isaiah Williams brought that. I thought Riley O'Toole brought that. Wes Lunt and Brandon Peters just didn't have that kind of oomph. Like when they got on the field, could they lift their teammates? I think Tommy DeVito has that. My questions are, can they protect him? And can he stay healthy? Those are the two things. Syracuse could not protect him, so he couldn't stay healthy. If they do that, I think Tommy DeVito can be a really solid Big Ten quarterback for Illinois. The other thing I'll mention, Art Sikowski, no question, number 2 guy, right? I think Ryan Johnson, no question, is the number 3. I think Donovan Leary, Kirkland Michaud, both very intriguing prospects long-term. I think Leary's got a really nice overall skill set. Kirkland Michaud looks the part, Joey. We haven't seen a lot of reps from him, but he certainly looks the part, has a decent arm. But I think those guys are going to need time, and they're going to need time and reps, and that's probably going to take a while.
I'm with you. And I want to circle back real quick to the competition, because the question I think you and I have, and probably people following the team, is like, okay, then why hasn't Brett just named Tommy DeVito the starter. Well, one, it's 1 week of camp, and you probably want to see your quarterback do this for more than 1 week of camp. And I know he's got the summer and the spring body of work, but you want to give Art the chance too. Yeah. And I thought, Brett, this is just me kind of hypothesizing a little bit. Tell me if you agree, Jeremy. Brett was asked about how he handles the quarterbacks last week when we talked to both Tommy and Art. And he said, I just think if the quarterback ever feels like he loses his head coach, he doesn't have a chance, right? And that, like, so now I'm trying to dive in, like, okay, what it meant last year, right? Like he wasn't going to go out there and be like, we need more from Brandon, or Art. But the obviousness was they needed more from the quarterback position. But I think if he were to go out and say, Tommy's, like you want to make sure Art still feels like if Tommy gets hurt in the next 2 weeks, you don't want to make Art feel like, well, okay, well, I guess I got no choice. Like you want to be able to kind of hype these guys up as much as they can and see if Art can go steal it. But otherwise, you want him to be ready like he was a year ago when he went in the first half against was it Nebraska?
Yeah, and I think we both know Art's like the professional. He's going to be prepared. Like he's going to prepare pretty much the same way. But there's a mental thing of like, okay, if I do really well today, or if I do really well this week, I might have a chance at the starting job. I think everyone in that program knows Tommy DeVito, barring a terrible camp, or Art Sikowski lighting the world on fire, which we haven't heard or seen, right? Like he's going to be the starter. Like Tommy DeVito will be the starter. But they got why not? Like why not let this play out? Why not have competition? Tommy, you better know if you don't play well in form, Art's right there. We're comfortable with Art Sikowski.
It's just as much about keeping Tommy gassed up than it is about trying to pump up the people behind him, I think.
Yeah. So I think that's smart of anything. Like there's obvious like, hey, sorry, Jamal Woods, we know you're not the starter. Keith Randolph and Johnny Newton are, but DeVito hasn't played. And that's my only question. Like, I think DeVito, I'm pretty bullish on him relatively. If we're talking about, can he be a solid Big Ten quarterback? I think he's got the tools. I think he's got the swagger. I think he's got the accuracy, but we got to see it when the bullets are flying on an Illinois offense that has questions around him. Right. So I think he should be an upgrade. I believe he'll be an upgrade, but we got to see it when it comes. All right. Running back, Joey, obviously one of the strengths of the team. And I don't think we've been dissuaded from that.
No, dude. Chase Brown can wreck things. I don't mean like bowling into somebody. I mean like he can just take over a drive and just be a force.
He did Saturday, right, when we saw him.
It's just he is really good. And I don't – this isn't some like, oh, the national – I don't care about that. But I don't think he's getting enough attention outside of – you're seeing a little bit more. But, dude, he's really, really good. And, by the way, you still have Josh McCray. Josh McCray showed a lot. Like this position is every bit as deep as we thought it was going to be, and it's really, really good.
Yeah, I'm opening up my Phil Steele magazine to see the running backs, right? And Braylon Allen, Trevion Henderson, I don't disagree with that being first team. Mo Ibrahim, Blake Corum, don't disagree with those guys being second team. But if Chase Brown were in a Michigan uniform, would he be above Corum? I think so. I think they're similar running backs. Right? Like that's no diss at Corum. I just think it is what it is. It's Illinois versus Michigan. Like what Chase Brown did last year without a passing attack was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I need to pull up Tom Fornelli. Our friend Tom Fornelli tweeted some stats about Chase Brown because Chase Brown literally just saw the entire opposing team, all 100 guys in the box every single time he looked. And why wouldn't you if you're a defense? It would be malpractice to honor the pass last year.
Yeah,
and Chase Brown still played well.
Yeah, like Chase isn't a bowling ball, but he's tough to bring down, right? Like, but man, I think what's improving with him, he's certainly got the speed, he's certainly got the agility, and the toughness. I think the patience has really helped him. We saw a run the other day where it was a stretch run. He waited, found a hole, hit it, gone. He's got that ability that if he's going to be patient like that and hit his hole, man, like he's got another big season, like. What is there? Would he be the third guy with 1,000 yard seasons, I believe, in Illinois history?
I think so. I would need to go back and look that up. Real quick, the Tom Fornelli stat. Chase Brown had 71 carries last season while facing at least 8 defenders in the box. 8 defenders. Just in case anyone forgot, there's 11 guys on the whole freaking defense. 8 defenders, and he averaged 5.96 yards per carry with 4.97 coming after contact.
Yep.
if Illinois can pass like at all, and you maybe have to get one of those defenders out of the box, Chase Brown can really do some things. Now, what does that look like statistically? I don't know that I would go higher than 1,500 yards because you also have Josh McCray, who is like Josh McCray.
Well, let's consider this. Like, we threw out some of these numbers, and some fans threw out some of these numbers, and I think Chase Brown's in for a huge year. The only guys who have run for 1,400 plus at Illinois are Rashard Mendenhall and Mikel Lashore. Freaks. I mean, they were bigger. They were just as fat. You know what I mean? So I pumped the brakes on some of those things, but 1,000 yards,
1,200 yards feels right.
Yeah, if Chase Brown's healthy, I think he's going over 1,000 yards. And the other thing is, I think he's getting more involved in the passing game. I think he's going to be much more involved. Joey, you sat next to me in the press box. I was calling for it all year. Like, if you can't pass the ball, find a way to get it to your best players in space. That was Isaiah Williams, Chase Brown, Daniel Barker. And they kept doing these 7-step drops. And it was like, what is happening? Like, if you can't protect, get it to your guys quickly in space. We saw a couple times Chase Brown on those wheel routes would get open. It's like, oh, that more, or Daniel Barker screen pass more. Like, let's do some of those things. I think Lunny's going to get those guys more involved. And that includes Josh McCray, who I think is going to be really good, because I think we forget he had like 2 or 3 really good games, right? Otherwise he was sick or he wasn't playing early in the season. That was just a glimpse of what Josh McCray can do. I don't think we've seen the full thing. And I think he's even more confident. And obviously he's been in the system for a year. He just knows how to do everything better.
Yeah, the only stat I'm going to keep in the press box all year is Jeremy Werner's. What are they doing? What is happening? Every time I hear that, we're just going to tally it up. We'll see how many. I guess the goal would be to have less what is happenings this year than you saw last year.
Well, I didn't do it a lot with defense, right? After the first 3 games. So kudos to them. And I think the depth is good. I think Reggie Love's a guy some people forget about. I think he can get involved at some point, but Hayden Lawfrey certainly adds speed. And Jordan Anderson, I think, can eventually be a bell cow kind of back and Josh McCray role. But I still think this is just me thinking. Like, I think he could be an H-back type player. I really do. I think he's a very talented, skilled player. All right, wide receiver, Joey. We got big questions outside of Isaiah Williams. So what's one big thing you've learned?
I think Pat Bryant, we might be sleeping on him a little bit. I mean, I think there's a reason he played as much as he did last. Like, the stats don't bear it out, right? But let's be honest. Look around the Illinois wide receiver, and the stats don't bear really a lot out for anything last year. But I think if the season started tomorrow, I would feel comfortable walking into the press box being like, Pat Bryant will be on the outside of opposite Casey Washington in those packages, because obviously Isaiah's in the slot and he's probably not leaving the field. So it'll either be Casey Washington and Isaiah or Pat Bryant. But I think we're kind of sleeping on it a little bit. I don't really have a lot to back that up, which is kind of weird because I like to have things that back up when I say something like that. But I just think it's coming. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't think it's going to be some like, oh my God, statistical year, but I just think he's consistently around and he's there. And I think that's going to play out in playing time.
I think he can be like Casey Washington was last year, right? Like, and he had 6 catches for 98 yards, I believe it was a good blocker. He's just a good overall skill set. So I really like Pat Bryant. I think him and Casey Washington are similar. I think Bryant might be a little bit more talented than him. He's a higher ranked recruit, that's for sure. But I also think we've seen flashes now of Brian Hightower, man. Like, spring game had a really good game. What we saw Saturday, I was like, okay, yes, that's why I was asking, why isn't he playing more? Like, what? And it seems like, we heard from Tony Peterson. He was playing who he thought gave him the best chance. We've heard from George McDonald. Brian knows how I coach now. Like, he's responding better to that. So it seems like there was something there. There certainly was an injury last year that slowed him down as well. But it just feels like the staff is saying better things about Brian. We haven't been able to talk with Brian quite yet, but he's talented and he's big and physical, and they need that. So it's a group I don't have a load of confidence in, Joey. But Jonah Morris adds size. Cody Case adds some speed, adds a little bit of depth. I like the young guys coming into this room. I think they got bright futures. I think Hank Beatty and Sean Miller could play right away. The competition's getting better here. The talent is getting better here. I think there's enough, because I think Isaiah Williams is going to have a monster year. I think he's going to put up huge numbers if he's healthy. I think there's enough here, but they need one of those guys to be reliable. I think Casey they like because he's reliable. Can Pat Bryant, Brian Hightower, if either of those guys are reliable, I think there's enough here.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to talk. Like when we talk about the Illinois receivers, that's the question: is there enough? Like because it's not going to be this coming season, probably not next season. The most talented even in the top half of the most talented wide receiver groups in the Big Ten. Like that's going to take some time to get there. And I like the way they're recruiting that. But is there enough? And I'm with you. I think I really, really wish, Jeremy, that even dating back to the spring game, we could see more Sean Miller.
Yeah.
Because I just keep thinking that, like, man, you need a polished receiver, somebody who's just, like I think we heard them praise him at IMG and kind of how he came in prepared. It's hard to go all the way full bore, like, hey, because he did miss the spring game and he's been recovering from, I think Brett Bielema said it was a collarbone injury, and he's been in a green practice jersey the times we've seen him. But I think he could be that guy where it's like October 1st and it's like, wait a second, here he comes. Like this is something. So I just wish that injury wouldn't have happened because it'd be easier to project out a little bit.
But I also think it's good that if you have a Bryant, you have a Hightower, if those guys step up, you don't have to rely on Sean Miller to make a huge impact. So I think that could be interesting. Tight end. They lost Daniel Barker. I'm not sure they think they got worse at this position because Luke Ford, they're trying to get it out of him, right? We all think there's really high ceiling. I'm driving the Tip Ryman train. Like I am conducting that. The things you hear about him, the way they put him out there to us, the reps he's getting in practice. He's 1A, 1B with Luke Ford in that tight end room. Like you see Tip Ryman on the field, guys. He looks like an Iowa tight end. Like if you saw him in an Iowa uniform, you'd be like, yeah, that guy looks like he belongs. I think Tip Ryman is going to be a huge part of this offense. I don't know how many catches that comes out to, but he's a great blocker. I think he's a capable receiver, and they love his approach to everything. So after that's probably Michael Marquez, but I think Tip Ryman is a player that Illinois fans need to know. I think he's going to be a huge part of what they do offensively.
Well, I really wish you were going to ask me the big takeaway so I could have stolen this Tip Ryman thunder since you've been driving the hype train with him. But I'm with you. I mean, it's legit. I mean, Brett Bielema, just think back to the spring where even because like in the spring, it was like, oh, all right. But like the speed hadn't really got moving on the hype train yet. But he would say things like he changed his body so much. And like you would just hear about how he approaches it. And like, okay, well, let me just store that one away. And then fall camp came, and even in the summer when we talked to Brett Bielema, it's like, okay, like that meant something. That wasn't just, hey, Tip did this 5 minutes ago before practice ended. Now I'm bringing it to the media thing. Like it carries something.
Yeah, and sometimes there's like the cute walk-on story, right, where they contribute, they find a way to get on scholarship. There's a few guys, and we'll get to one at linebacker too, that it's different. The way they talk about him is he's on scholarship continually, but that he's going to be a big part of this. And Tip, for people that don't know, Rod Smith recruited him out of South Dakota, was like 210 pounds when he was a high school prospect, but came into Illinois and just committed himself to the weight room. He's added about 50 pounds, and he looks like Ivan Drago. He's just really impressive, and everything you hear about his work ethic, his focus is great. So I think he's going to play a big role. He's a great blocker for him last year when he came in, caught a touchdown pass against Minnesota. So I think he's really capable, and I think you're going to see a lot of Luke Ford and him on the field. And then the freshmen are really intriguing, right? I think, Henry Boyer, they love the size. Navion Cargill looks the part of, a raw but probably talented hybrid receiver. And Owen Anderson's a little bit in between. So I think that group can eventually be good, but maybe one of them plays. Maybe one of them finds the rotational role this year.
Yeah, I guess my initial thought in the spring was maybe that'll be Owen Anderson, but Brett Bielema's really talked about Henry Boyer quite a bit.
Oh, wow.
And a lot. And kind of his makeup and let's call it a skirmish with Gabe Akis, because when I hear fight, I'm picturing like a fight. I don't know. Let's call it a skirmish with him in summer workouts, because they like took each other's reps. I'm like, oh, all right. Like Brett Bielema's mentioned him a few times. So I would maybe think he could be that guy because his pass catching game, like everyone saw his friends, like fans, us to some degree saw it like left tackle, huh? But like he can catch the ball too, and I think that might be overlooked a little bit.
Yeah, 6'6", 265 already. And I'm sure the Boyer family's sick of hearing about his future at left tackle. But hey, if it is, like there's a lot of money at left tackle, by the way. But because of that, I think he can be a jumbo blocker this year. And I agree. I think he's a better athlete than maybe even we gave him credit for. Just seeing him run around the other day. He doesn't look like just a jumbo tight end who's a pseudo offensive lineman, extra offensive lineman. He looks like he's a pretty good athlete as well. So yeah, they've been impressed. Pleasantly impressed by Henry Boyer so far. All right, let's switch to the offensive line, Joey. Big questions once the season was done. Obviously, Alex Palczewski coming back is big for them, but what is your biggest takeaway so far?
I don't want to say the 5 is set because I think there's still competition at right guard. But to me, there's like the 6. There's a top 6, and then there's the field. And the top 6 is Alex Palczewski, Alex Pihlstrom, Jordan Slaughter, Isaiah Adams, Zy Chrysler, and Julian Pearl. And I think what we're seeing more and more, Jeremy, is the right guard competition is coming down to Zy Chrysler and Jordan Slaughter. Because I feel like Isaiah Adams, he could probably move to right. Like if Jordan Slaughter wins, could he go to left, Isaiah Adams to right? Sure. Like that's on the table. But I like those two to me are competing for that 5th spot.
Yeah, I think that's I think Isaiah Adams is a wrap for the starting spot. Alex Pihlstrom seems like a wrap for center. I'm really interested to see Pihlstrom because he struggled with snapping in the spring game, but the staff's putting a lot of faith in him, right? They didn't go get a guy to start right away at center like they considered. They saw enough from Pihlstrom. Who struggled. I mean, he's mentioned this. He struggled with confidence at times. Being a former walk-on tight end, do I belong here? But the center, there's a lot on the center in this offense, and then really any offense. But he's got to make the play calls, and he's got to be good. I think they're hoping he can be a solid starter for them. But that's going to be interesting going in the first 3 weeks of the season, the non-conference for me, or even Indiana game, is to see, does Pihlstrom really assert himself? But I think he's asserted himself as a starter. That's for sure. I got a depth question for this year. I really do. The guys after it, Slaughter, I think he can be fine. I think he's a good 6th guy on the interior. He's taking some snaps at center, which is intriguing. I think Josh Kreutz is obviously undersized, but I just love him makeup wise. I think he's a nasty player. I think he could fill in a pinch at center. I think Zach Barlev can fill in a pinch. I don't know if those guys are coming in and you're not taking a step down though, right? Like most backups you are, but I'm concerned about just depth if you have an injury or two. And that's true of most positions on Illinois, which is still the big problem about the program and why this is going to take some time. But there's still, for me, depth questions because I got questions about Pihlstrom. I got questions about Chrysler and Slaughter. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these guys who are in the starting lineup are in the starting lineup for the first time at Illinois as like the full year starter. So if those guys struggle or if they get hurt, what's behind them? I am very high on Julian Pearl, by the way. I think he's going to have a really good year at left tackle.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think you can go glass half full and say some of that depth, not offset completely, but the versatility and the guys who can play multiple positions, you could probably withstand one.
Yeah, let me explain that, Joey, because Isaiah Adams is the backup swing tackle. Right now, Tommy Cronin and Josh Geske are taking the second string tackle spots. Those guys aren't going to be the 3rd tackle, right? That's Isaiah Adams. And Slaughter could probably come in and play center, right? If you need a bigger offensive line. That's certainly a big takeaway. Is a much bigger offensive line, that's for sure.
Yeah, the Slaughter at center is interesting because as of like a month ago, you and I were not of the belief that was maybe something that was on the table. So either we were kind of duped a little bit or he's come along in that field, which I think is an entirely possible thing. But yeah, I think you have 6, you could throw Barlev recruits. Like you probably have 7 or 8 guys that if you get beyond them, okay, like you might be in for it a little bit. Your question about protecting Tommy DeVito looms quite large, but I think there's so many different ways they can mix and match that you can deal with some of it, but certainly not much. And depth is that's still something to be built, and they're trying. I mean, they addressed it intermediate, short, long term, but still some ways to go there.
Just to be clear, like they have made huge strides at this position from where I thought they'd be in December. I thought this was going to be one of the biggest weaknesses on the team. The fact that Isaiah Adams and Crystal, you can plug in as starter, and Alex Palczewski is back, feel way better about the position. I feel pretty good about the starting five. Like I think they'll be pretty good, but depth just is a huge issue for Illinois for many years. So if they do have one or two injuries, it will be a concern. All right, defensive line, Joey. We know Johnny Newton. We know Keith Randolph. Going to be really good. We know they're probably not going to come off the field very much. But what's your biggest takeaway otherwise?
Well, at the risk of just sounding like the exact same thing we said for the offensive line, the big takeaway is, has Calvin Avery taken that step and turned into the playing like the four-star prospect that he was? Because if he does, he plays at nose guard, which is where they really, really need somebody to take up and step into that role. And they brought competition, but you've heard some pretty good reviews on Calvin Avery, down 20 pounds. That's something to really, really monitor, Jeremy, because I thought he played well at times down the stretch last season.
He's always showing flashes, man. It's just, can he sustain it? And I almost want to talk to Calvin about, like, do you ever get sick of people talking about your weight? Right? I feel bad about talking about it, but it has held him back. Like it had, and the fact that JMO came out, Terrence Jamison, and said he's lost 30 pounds and he's rapping with the first team, and they're saying good things about him. Now, JMO made sure to use the qualifier. We keep pushing him, but it's time. And I asked JMO about that. Like, does it seem like he knows this is it? Like this is the last year to live up to that. And if you want a football future, you got to put it on the field this year. So that's encouraging. I think that's really encouraging that to hear that, because I don't think you hear the same thing about Vertus Brown quite yet. And they added competition. T-Rod Edwards, you can tell JMO loves him, loves his work ethic, loves his motor, all of that. Rashawn Wilkins, they brought in two guys to compete with Calvin Avery and Vertus Brown. And it does seem like it's revved up Calvin Avery a little bit. So I'm not expecting Calvin Avery to play 60 snaps a game, but can he give you 35 really good reps at nose guard? Because we know he's talented enough. We know it. The question is, can he be consistent? And I can't wait to talk to Calvin if we get a chance to talk with Calvin, just to talk about what this process has been like and what this opportunity is like. Because Roderick Perry came in and stole his job as a transfer from South Carolina State. So I feel good about the depth they have at nose guard. I'm not as quite sure behind Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph. I think those guys are really important, but I think adding competition was great here.
Yeah, I do too. And they needed to, right? I mean, I don't think any of us we're shocked when we saw them get in the portal and start adding some guys. I think adding two guys told us a lot where they are. But yeah, again, it's the same thing I thought offensive line wise, Jeremy, is okay. I think you have to feel good about Keith Randolph. You have to feel good about Johnny Newton. You're starting to hear some good vibes about Calvin Avery. Obviously, T-Rod Edwards got a lot of buzz, but man, what happens beyond them, right? And what happens if Keith Randolph or Johnny Newton have to miss time, or dude, it's going to be really, really hot early. Like, what happens if you got to maybe expand your rotation a little bit? So I think that's still going to continue to be a concern, I think. And maybe Rashawn Wilkins or T-Rod Edwards, when T-Rod Edwards returns, can be backups to those guys. But you got to hope for health at the defensive line spot. And you've probably got to hope for one other guy beyond, let's put Calvin in the mid, like one other guy to kind of step up.
Yeah. The line I wrote was, did the law firm add another partner? Because if you can add Calvin Avery, I mean, because let's be honest, like Calvin Avery, Vertus Brown, Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph, they were all great recruiting wins for Illinois. Lovie Smith recruited this position pretty well, and I'll include Moses Akpala in there, who medically retired from football. But like that, there was some talent there. He left Brett Bielema with some talent, and Johnny Newton and Rashawn and Keith Randolph, you saw them take those steps last year. You get Calvin, man, like that's a Big Ten quality offensive line or defensive line. Like that's a talented Big Ten defensive line. All right, kind of sticking in the defensive front, Joey, outside linebacker, a deeper group. I think we think it's going to be a talented group for a while because Kevin Kane's done a really nice job in recruiting. But what's your takeaway on what is a new group with Isaiah Gay and Owen Carney gone?
One, I think Seth Coleman is kind of on the verge here of taking a good step forward, a big step forward. We saw it in flashes last season. Two, I know they're excited or they believe they have the depth, but I just don't feel like it's as proven. And even though it was a new position for Owen Carney and a new position for Isaiah Gay last year, they had 5 years or 4 years of college football snaps and experience, and they played, especially Owen all season and Isaiah Gay down the stretch. Like, you got good production out of those guys. Who is the other side of Seth Coleman? We think it's going to be Ezekiel Holmes, but there's other options there. Could it maybe be Alec Bryant? Could it? I don't know what to make of it beyond Seth Coleman, and some of that's probably, frankly, Jeremy, we just haven't seen it. The opportunities just haven't existed to this point. But until we see it, that's going to be in my mind.
Yeah, I think there's talent here, right? I don't think there's a talent deficiency. That's for sure. There's just not a lot of experience outside of Seth Coleman. I think Seth Coleman, I think a lot of Illini fans know him, right? But the casual Illini fan, like I wrote one day for my Devin Witherspoon story, why the casual Illini fan should know more about Devin Witherspoon. Because while I know hardcore Illinois fans know all about him, he's been good for a couple of years. I don't know if the casual fan like knows that Devin Witherspoon is really good and that he could be a star this year. It's the same thing with Seth Coleman. I think enough people that are hardcore fans like, oh, 24/7 Sports had him as a top 300 prospect, right? Like he played and started some games last year, but I don't know if the casual fan who just shows up on Saturdays, watches on Saturdays, hopes they win. I don't know if they know a lot about Seth Coleman. He's got all the tools. And I think we've seen the flashes of brilliance when he started some games. But as Kevin Kane said, he got Wally pipped, got hurt. And then Isaiah Gay came in after getting benched and played the best football of his career. I thought Coleman could have started last year and been just fine. And I think this year he's in for a really big year. I think he's got NFL potential. Ezekiel Holmes, I feel is like he could be a solid starter. Can Alec Bryant be better? Like, that's the question. Can Gabe Akis eventually be better? Like, I think Gabe Akis can play right away. I think Jared Beatty could play right away if he stayed healthy. We just haven't seen him stay healthy through a camp yet. He's kind of been limited both in the spring with a knee injury and now through training camp starting now. So I think both those guys could do it, but I'm getting the feeling it's a Holmes Bryant battle, right? And Bryant has no experience. Holmes does have experience, both really physically impressive looking guys. But they're trying to take that Owen Carney role. I think Seth Coleman is the noisemaker of this group. And I think he's really important to what they do.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And we still haven't seen Alec Bryant, the limited bit we've seen, Jeremy, and spring game included. So we have to kind of piece together. We haven't seen Alec Bryant go with the first team much. And I don't know if that is, is it trying to light a fire in him? Is it because Ezekiel Holmes is just head and shoulders, or just maybe not head and shoulders, but above him? So I'm with you. I think it's those two for now, because I can't get rid of the feeling. I don't think Gabe Akis is far. And I think maybe as you get 4 games and maybe you try to get him out there in some reps, in 6 weeks, what does that look like? 6 weeks after Wyoming, what's that look like? Could Gabe Akis find his way in there? Because I've said this before, and I don't mean this as a slight to DJ Johnson by any stretch, because he was fine as a true freshman. As fine as a true freshman can be. Gabe Akis physically looks more ready to walk out there right now.
Let's just put the numbers out there. DJ Johnson was 215 pounds. Gabe Akis is 265, and he looks 240 because he's just a rock, right? He's DJ Johnson.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, man. So yeah, I think for right now that's it. But Akis, like if we did maybe this is a story, Jeremy. Someone can take this when they listen to this. Who is the candidate by like the second bye week to come out of that as like an emerge in the rotation further? Yeah. Like, who are those candidates? Because right now I think it's Gabe Akis would be that player for me. And there's probably some other ones out in the mix. Aiden Lawfrey could be in there, Sean Miller, whatever the case may be.
I was about to do like I was going to do this towards the end. Let's do a freshman that we think can make an impact at some point during the season. But yeah,
I think Gabe would be high on that list. He'd be high on mine too. I think that list changes depending on what point of the season we're talking about, because I think he is a candidate for mid-year. Holy crap. came out of nowhere, or to get in the rotation. Like I think that could be him as he just acclimates to it a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, would it surprise you like if he was the number 4 outside linebacker in this group?
Oh no.
Like Shimon Cooper's taking second team reps, but compared to these other guys, he's undersized, right? And Beatty looks great. He hasn't practiced a lot, it seems like. All right, moving on to linebacker. I think you feel pretty good about the top 2. Calvin Hart Jr., even though it was only a very small sample size, it was a great sample size in the Nebraska game last year. Tariq Barnes, kind of an unsung hero, playing 2 positions last year. What do you think of this group, Joey, that otherwise doesn't have a lot of experience?
Well, in my mind, I still think of it as a top 2 because, one, you see primarily they play 2 linebackers together. But I think in talking to people, top 3 feels more right because there's some confidence brewing in Isaac Darkangelo, former walk-on Division II player. Both Ryan Walters and Andy Boo have raved about how fast he is. So I think he is probably more in that top conversation, top 3 it would be, than I would have thought coming into fall camp, that I would have thought after spring ball. He's really there, and he's not going away, it doesn't seem like. And that seems to be a pretty clear-cut top 3 to me.
Yeah, it was kind of the Tip Ryman of the defense for me. They talk about how he's one of the fastest guys at linebacker. And they have a pretty fast linebacking core. Like I think they're definitely adding speed to this group, which they need. I thought Lovey had some guys who were pretty good athletes, but dating back to like the Beckman era, there was good linebackers, but not that fast. I think this group certainly has speed. Like I think Kenenna Odaluga looks the part. Dylan Rosiak is with the second team, and I'm high in the future of Malachi Hood and James Kreutz. Kreutz is just, he's a Kreutz, plays with his hair on fire. Malachi Hood looks so good. He's just going to need some time to develop. But Darkangelo, I think they bet a lot on him, right? He's on scholarship. They didn't go get a linebacker when we thought after Kalon Tolson entered the NFL draft, surprisingly, that they might go get a linebacker. They didn't. I think that says what they feel about Darkangelo, and then to some extent, Rosiak and Odaluga. But talking with Andy Boo, they have confidence in Darkangelo as a starter, that if Calvin Hart gets hurt or Tariq Barnes get hurt or they need a blow, that Darkangelo could be the player. And former D2 transfer, I think that says a lot. So while that could make fans uneasy, we got questions about it. The staff is really, really confident in him.
Yeah, at some point we should discuss who's more overlooked on this defense. Quan Martin, we'll get to him, or Tariq Barnes. Because Tariq Barnes has been pretty freaking reliable for them and playing multiple positions. People maybe don't want to hear this. This is a pretty good find by Miles Smith late in the process when he landed him out of Memphis. But yeah, there's some quiet, I don't know if it's quiet confidence, but you can feel the confidence that they're having in that linebacker room. And Andy Boo, Andy Boo is a sitting defensive coordinator. Like he's been a defensive coordinator in Power 5 football. That's a pretty good dude to have leading your position group there, and you're seeing that and maybe some of the development of these guys, even if it's not James Kreutz and Malachi Hood weren't major Power 5 recruiting wins, but there's an excitement there, and you're seeing some of that confidence start to come out a little bit.
Yeah, and I think Boo maybe doesn't get enough credit for what happened last year. You lose Jake Hansen and CJ Hart to season-ending knee injuries. Those guys combined for 6 combined starts or 7, and you still had pretty good linebacker play on what was a really strong defense. So kudos to Boo for that development. All right, cornerback. Devin Witherspoon's really good. I almost had to be reminded when I saw the stat the other day that he had 8 tackles for loss. He reminds me of Nate Hobbs with the way he comes up and runs support. And then he's a pretty good cover corner. He had a really good year last year. Great end of the year for Devin Witherspoon. What do you make of the rest of this group, Joey?
I think it's Taz Nicholson on the other side. And I'll tell you, I think, Jeremy, you and I are probably in the same spot on this. I don't know that I was that confident about that after spring ball. We had talked several times, boy, they should probably try to find a corner in the portal. Maybe they had to do that. And they didn't. They did go get Terrell Jennings, but that wasn't a power, they didn't take him from Power 5 program. They took him from a D2 Minnesota State program. He's on campus now, by the way. He was repping what we saw with the second team. So I think he's going to push Taz Nicholson. but they're rolling with what they got there, man. And I think it's Taz's to lose. I've cooled down a little bit. I know I've shared with you. I thought Elijah McCantos, I was all the way, going. We'll see. He's coming off. He had surgery when he first got here, but I still question depth opposite Witherspoon.
Yeah,
but Aaron Henry seems very, very confident.
I think we're going to learn a lot about Taz Nicholson in the first 3 games, right? If you're an opposing defensive coach, you got to throw the ball against Illinois. Who are you going to throw it at? It's going to be Taz Nicholson. I mean, the guy who's unproven. Like, you're not going to throw it at Quan Martin and Sidney Brown and Devin Witherspoon. Maybe you attack Kendall Smith, but the corner you'd rather go at is Taz Nicholson. So it's going to be a baptism by fire. And last year he played 200 snaps. Like, he started a couple games as Tony Adams was benched at one point, where again, he came back and had the best ball of his career. Taz wasn't ready. And the coaching staff knows that, but they wanted to see what they had. But he seems to have gained confidence. He's gained a lot of strength. But I think we're going to learn a lot about him. I think that's a big question mark of the defense, is that other corner spot is Taz. So if he struggles, I think Jennings gets a shot. He gives him length and some physicality. Tyler Strain is a name to know. Aaron Henry talks pretty positively about all his guys, but he said Strain had a fabulous first week. And I still wouldn't go all the way empty on your Elijah McCantos hype. Like, I think he's one guy that, as you talked about with Akis, 4 or 5 weeks into the season, kind of like Devin Witherspoon's first year, he reminds me of Devin with his confidence. He's kind of skinny, but he's not afraid to hit like he's 200 pounds.
We saw that in the open practice.
Yeah. So I wouldn't cool completely. That's a guy that mid-year we could be talking about is potentially making a rotation role. All right, safety. I think you feel great about this position, both for the present and for the future. Sidney Brown's one of the best players in the team, and the coaching staff will tell you Quan Martin's right there with him. Plays nickel. Some people might qualify as a corner, but he practices with the safeties. And then Kendall Smith seems like he's solidified a starting spot. So I think the questions are kind of what's behind them, right? Because, I mean, Kendall Smith is a question, even though he's a 6th-year player. But I think the big questions are about depth behind them if Sidney Brown or Quan Martin or Kendall Smith misses time.
Yeah, also with Quan, I think there are packages. If you just go 2 safeties without a slot, the Quan can go back and play free safety. Like and Ryan Walters has raved about his versatility and really allowing them to do a lot of things. Like, I think he's tremendously overlooked as he continues to be, but he's awfully good and they're not hiding it. But yeah, what's behind them? We learned recently that Matthew Bailey is somebody to know probably sooner, Jim. Let's be honest, dude. Sooner than we probably thought we would need to really.
That's fair to say. That's fair. I mean, think about Matthew Bailey's story. And we covered it when he was recruited. He came on a visit, one of those workouts after COVID, because you couldn't go to these camps and stuff during the spring because recruiting was shut down. And he worked out for the staff. Like Malachi Hood did one of these, impressed the staff, got an offer. Matthew Bailey came here after a track meet, after a 3-hour drive from Moline, and he struggled. Like, he said it himself, like, I did not perform well, and he didn't get an offer. But Pat Ryan, the Illinois director of high school relations in Illinois, a longtime Metamora coach, kept on him, kept watching him, kept getting him filmed to the coaches. And Ryan Walters was not at that workout. And Ryan went and saw him during the evaluation period, liked his film, saw him during the evaluation period, thought he was a good athlete, and he's a great kid, really intelligent. And they took a chance on him, and he was taking first team reps on Saturday when Sidney Brown was just out with a cautious thing for the athletic trainer. So yeah, Matthew Bailey, 2 deep, potentially 1 snap away from being a starter. Those are the fun camp developments. Like, oh, Mike Dudek is a star. Oh, Matthew Bailey is repping with the first string today. Those are the things I like being able to see and parlaying to the fans here.
Yeah, I mean, before we saw Matthew Bailey do anything, like, if you would have been like, hey, what happens if there's an injury? And I would still lean into these guys and say Prince Green, Keontae Curry. But I would not have picked Matthew Bailey. I'm sure confident in saying you wouldn't, and none of us who cover the team daily would have said that. But this is the Walters effect, man. And there's still one away. The big one, Jair Hill, we covered that at length. But there's something about him that recruits are just, one, is success in his development, And he's captivating, man. And you're seeing that play out on the recruiting trail. And you're seeing really an eye for talent. I mean, if he would have overlooked Matthew Bailey, no one would have blamed him. Would you? No one would have been like, oh my God, what? Now, in 4 years, had he gone like to a Big Ten school, which really wasn't much on the radar, you would have said, boy, what an overlooked mistake. But no one would have said that. No one would have said that if he didn't go to Moline, and credit to Pat Ryan for that as well. So I just think like for as long as Ryan Walters is in Champaign, that is a position room that is going to be pretty solid, we think. And the question I have is it feels like offensive line a little bit last year, Jeremy, where it's like you've got all these veteran 5th year, 6th year guys, and then it's like what happened between there, because you don't have a lot in between those 5th and 6th year guys and those 1st and 2nd year guys.
Well, a couple bad recruiting classes happened under all this.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean what happened. We all know what happened.
Right.
Like there's are some similarities there, I think, between the line last year and the safety room this year.
Yeah, and I think there's some talent. Solo Turner adds some experience. I think adding Solo told me something maybe about Prince and Keontae. They didn't think those guys were quite ready. But Keontae Curry's repping at free safety. Prince Green a little bit of strong from what we saw. I still think those guys are talented, but maybe you need to be more consistent. That's what Ryan told me the other day. And then TJ Griffin, they like as a free safety eventually. So I think that's a good room. I think safety, you feel, is one of the better positions on the defense. All right, let's wrap it up with specialist talk, Joey. One of our favorite things. Biggest takeaway: kicker, punter, long snapper.
Run. It's like that. I didn't really buy that it was much of a competition before. Hugh Robertson's going to be the punter. I hope some national media picks up on the fact that old man Hugh is back there punting footballs for Illinois, and Caleb Griffin's going to be the kicker. Like that's Brett Bielema said the first day of camp, those guys had a leg up on it. And I don't think that has changed. I'm pretty confident in saying that hasn't changed. And I think Aiden Hall is going to be the long snapper. I know we have some pretty passionate long snapper fans in the Illinois fan base. So I think it's going to be Aiden Hall who's going to have that job, and we'll see from there. But it feels you got to worry about it again because you haven't had to worry about it for 5 years. But maybe not even worry. There are going to be new faces, and you just don't have as much of a body of work as what to expect. You probably want to talk about the returners.
Yeah, I will. But let me talk about the specialist for a second. I think this is a big deal. Like this is a really big deal. I know we kind of joke about specialists, but Illinois has been spoiled, man, for the last several years. James McCord has been one of the better kickers. I'd say a top 5 kicker in the Big Ten, top 6 kicker in the Big Ten. And Blake Hayes has been one of the top 3 kickers for 5 straight years, or punters for the last 5 years. Like you have to replace those guys. And I think Hugh Robertson, they feel comfortable with as a punter. He's going to be as good as Blake, maybe not. Great story from Australia as well. 29 years old, but he looks pretty good. Like he looks like a capable Big Ten punter. Not going to probably be as good as Blake Hayes, but looks good. Caleb Griffin hasn't been as maybe running away with this job yet, but it seems like he's got it over Will McManus and Fabrizio Petone. But he's got some experience. And listen, I don't know if there's many people on this team I like covering more than Caleb Griffin, but he's got to prove it, right? And has been shaky at times through the last year. That matters when you're going to be in close games in the Big Ten West. So in long snapper, Ethan Tabell barely ever had a bad snap, right? And I was sitting there with Michael Martin, former long snapper with Illinois, and I just see a snap go back and don't see a difference. Like Michael's got that was a little wobbly. This one not as good. So it was interesting hearing him, but I think Aiden Hall's got that one. But a team that had a lot of close games last year and had good specialists, this matters. And this could sway some games. And for a team that, like, if you're between picking 5 wins or 6 wins or 7, like, the specialist could play a huge role in that.
Can I add? I didn't think about this until now. Now I'm remembering seeing some field goal practice. You got a new holder too. Blake was a pretty good holder, and it looks like you're going to keep with the punter as a holder, Hugh Robertson deal. But that's also, just put that in the back of your mind. Like it's a whole new operation, and you have new everything. And will it matter? I don't know. If you're Illinois, you sure as heck hope it doesn't. But like that's another element into this.
Yeah, and then returner. I think the news is Isaiah Williams probably going to be the punt and kick returner on this team. Like Sean Miller's in the mix, Cody Case is in the mix, other guys. are in the mix. But I know you're going to talk to Snyder and Bielema more about this week, but Bielema has talked about how Snyder likes Isaiah Williams back there. Isaiah Williams talked to me about, he likes the idea of returning. I think it's great for his NFL stock. It's just the philosophy of, do you put a starter and very important player out there to be risked due to injury? But if he's the best at what they do, I get the argument for it, because I think he could be really, really good at it.
Yeah, there's also the philosophy. Like, there's so much to unpack in this, Jeremy, which this is like a deep dive after we got over our holder and long snapper discussion. What's the philosophy? Because last year we saw a lot of fair catch, don't risk anything, fair catch, and get the offense out there. Does that change when you have someone like Isaiah Williams who can be back there, Cody Case, who can be back there and really flip momentum? Like, what's the approach there? Is it a different approach? I don't know. Like, maybe last year Brett Bielema thought the best case was just you have Donnie Navarro, waved everybody, catch the ball, and don't, like, low risk, high reward type deal. High reward in the sense it's not a turnover. But, like, man, there's so much layered in there.
Yeah, did he do that because he felt like he had no one else who could catch the ball?
Or is that what he believes?
Yeah, or is that, like, is he more, hands off with that? Like, I looked back at his Wisconsin days, and he had 1 year where Jared Aberdeus, who was one of their top wide receivers and played in the NFL for your Packers, was he catching passes from yeah, he was a Rodgers guy, right? That was a long time ago. But he had Aberdeus return kicks. Like, Melvin Gordon, when he was a freshman, was returning kicks. Like, but Melvin Gordon wasn't the go-to running back at that time. It was Monty Ball and James White, and then Melvin Gordon, which is just ridiculous. So he's got a little history of doing that, but it felt like he maybe had a backup most of the time that he felt was the best option as well as a returner. If he thinks Isaiah Williams, who happens to be his number one option in the passing game, is also his best kick returner, that's not rare. I mean, we've seen some other teams put their best guy back there too.
Yeah, I mean, the risk of injury is probably low, because if things, like, Isaiah Williams is a really smart football player. If he looks up and things look like they can go south real fast, he's just going to wave to everybody and get you're just going to avoid the problem there. So I don't know. I'm so fascinated by that, because we just haven't seen really a robust kick or punt return game at Illinois in a while. Who was the last good? When I say good, like, remember, this is relative, right? Like, when I first got on the beat, do you remember Jordan Holmes? I thought he was a good punt returner.
Yeah,
I think he tore up his knee, but we just haven't seen that.
Yeah, I mean, kick returner Dre Brown had a good year.
Dre Brown was really good, and he was really smart, really, really smart as a returner.
But other than that, it was Vangelo Bentley, and Vangelo Bentley was a starting cornerback. So, like, that was 9-10 years ago. Vangelo Bentley was returning punts and kicks for Illinois, but he was a starting cornerback. It was really important for Illinois, but he was really good. He returned a kick and a punt for a touchdown return. All right, Joey, any big takeaways before we get out of here?
Well, I was promised before we recorded you were going to ask me my favorite in honor of Zachary Tobe committing to Illinois. So for anyone who stuck through the last hour and 15 minutes, there's nuggets at the end.
Yes,
so, but since you screwed up royally.
Well, can I pose you with the question? Yeah. Just to whiteboard this.
I was going to reverse it. And ask you first, and I was going to obviously fix your bad take.
I don't have one right now.
That's a bad take.
So I need you to vamp. While I figure mine out. So yeah, Zach Tobe committed. I got sidetracked, and sometimes you have these plans of what you're going to do on a podcast, you just totally forget. And so yeah, I was going to ask Joey, huge Office fan, since we're talking about Tobe and Zach Tobe, what is your favorite Tobe Michael interaction in the Office?
And I'm sure I'm going to be mad that I missed one later, but during the Christmas episode, I think Tobe asked Michael to sign something, and Michael signed it and just threw the pen at his forehead, which is, I don't even think he said anything. I just think he threw it back. Or, I mean, the easy one is, who do you think you are? What gives you the right? Of all the idiots in all the idiot villages, you stand alone. Which I like. That's a hard one to top. I'm gonna get that on a T-shirt if anyone wants to make me a T-shirt.
Isn't the continuation of that, like, why do you choose to be the way that you are? Like, isn't that the other part?
He's like sitting on Pam's desk, just staring at him.
Of all the idiots, you stand alone, my friend. I hate so much about the things you choose to be. That's what I was saying. Of course, there's the no when he was coming back. Or when he was leaving, right? They had a big party for him.
Oh, goodbye, Toby.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, Threat Level Midnight is the most expensive scene. When his head going off. Great stuff.
Man.
Great stuff. Man. All right. I think we covered everything. Illinois football. We'll have more, of course. I was hoping to, break this up into multiple pods, but we had to get this out, Joey. Because we've been low on the podcast. But you and Piper filled in admirably last week. Great conversation with Brad Underwood. I appreciated the mudslinging between both sides of that one. That was a fun one.
It had to be done. We had to take it outside of Twitter. There's been too much Twitter fighting to not get this thing squared away.
Yeah, it's a real rivalry. It's a real heated thing in real life.
I won't throw a pin at Brad Underwood. I promise you that.
Oh, it's not quite Toby Michael levels.
He would be Michael Scott in this instance.
Yes. Yes, I absolutely would. I think you should take that as a badge of honor that Brad Underwood even acknowledges you, Joey. And he is on social media. We confirm that.
I don't think he was ready to confirm it, but I don't think he could hide from it at that point.
Yeah, he is. Yes. All right, Joey. Thank you as always for the time. Thank you everybody for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. We appreciate you. Give us a follow, rating, and review wherever you get your podcast. Everybody take care of each other. Have a great day. And we'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.